Hey, how's everybody doing today? I hope everybody is good. Today, I want to speak to you about a question that popped up in my mind about 2 nights ago, and I want to see what your take is on it. I found it to be very interesting that this question has not come up already. At least I haven't heard the question been be asked. So, with that said, I want to explain something before I ask the question. I want to kind of let you know what led to the question. So, I don't know how long ago, but somewhere between the transition of 1985 up to now, when we look on TV, there was actors acting. They were in these shows and they were actors. They went to school for it and they were actors. They were born to act and they had most of the leads in movies and things of that nature that were on TV. But slowly we saw artists such as rappers and singers who mainstreamed into the acting profession. So when that was going on, we had artists getting actor roles, lead acting roles over those who went to college for acting, those who went to school for acting. We seen that transition, and I can remember Samuel. I think it was Samuel L. Jackson who I think he was in an article, but and he said something in reference to these actors. It's not fair for these actors to not get these roles and get to have them lost to people who never act before, who never been to acting school, but just come on all of a sudden, and all of a sudden they're actors. And I think he was referring to, artists, singers who've never acted in their life. So leading up to today, we see a lot of actors on reality TV. We see a lot of rap artists who have their own shows. We see a lot of rap artists who have been in movies. Busta Rhyme, he was in Halloween. I forgot which one. Neo was in Stomp the Yard. Like those type of roles, artists are taking over from people who have been acting all their life. So Samuel L. Jackson is saying, hey, look, we shouldn't be passed over. And it's not fair that these people, these actors and these artists are coming in, taking our roles when we have been doing this for life. This is what were born to do. This is what we wanted to do. We went to school for this. We paid a lot of money to go to school to learn this. And he's saying that it's not fair for someone to just come in and take that role when they haven't done a bit of acting in acting school or nothing. Now that brings me to podcasting. So, with that said, what I just said, do you think that podcasters who are starting a podcast should just be able to start a podcast? Now let me rephrase that. Do you think there should be some type of so right now I'll just take iTunes for a second. There's a requirement for the cover art. It has to be at least 14 by 14, I believe. If it's not, it's a no-go. Right? So that's a requirement. So what I'm asking, do you think, here's the question. You waiting? It's coming. It's coming. All right. So here's the question. Do you think there should be requirements for those who are starting a podcast? Do you think there should be audio requirements? Because here's the thing. Everybody has a podcast now, which is everybody's has a podcast. Now we're in a time now where, back in the day you'd say, I have a podcast, and they'll be like, oh wow, you have a podcast. Wow, that guy has a podcast. That's something. But now it's like if you say I have a podcast, oh really? You have a podcast? It's no big deal because everybody has one now. The podcasts that separate each other, the good ones from the bad ones, is those who put the time in, who put everything in this to have good audio, who cares about their audio, who make sure the audio is good or the video is good, with good content. Now, I'm not saying these new podcasters, people, not new podcasters, but people who are popping up doing podcasts don't have good content. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is I find that a lot of new podcasters who are just jumping on and doing podcasts on Anchor and all of that stuff, they're doing it from their phone. The audio sounds like crap. And my question is, because of that, it's like they're doing the same thing with the acting and the artists. Like these artists were just coming in, not doing a bit of acting in their past and getting these acting roles. And now we have podcasters who come in who have a podcast and it sounds like crap because of the audio. And it's just like you are. I want to be careful how I put this, but it's like it's kind of like the one bad apple spoils the whole bunch type of thing. Like, okay, so we continue to have these podcasts that sound terrible. And do you think it's giving us a bad name? Like podcast is a bad name. I wouldn't say giving us a bad name, but I can't explain what I'm asking, I guess. Like, do you think, basically I want to know, do you think there should be a requirement of audio, some type of audio requirement or audio standard for new podcasters to get onto iTunes, Stitcher, whatever the podcast platform is, just podcasting platforms, period. Do you think there should be some type of audio requirement as well as cover art? That's the question. Do you think there should be some type of audio standard requirement for a podcast as there is with cover art? Good question. I'd like for you to answer that. Me personally, I think it should be. Now, with that said, to have an audio standard, you're talking about more people having to listen to the podcast. I guess the staff from whatever the platform is, iTunes or whoever, Stitcher, they would have to listen to these podcasts to check the audio quality. So that takes more work and probably result in longer approvals for podcasts. But do you think that it's worth it? Because one thing it just gets to me, like when I listen to a podcast or listen to somebody's podcast and the audio is just terrible, I'm just like, ugh. It's like a guy with a thick mustache and he ate some food and there's food still on his mustache and you can't tell him that there's something there. It's just like you got to let him just watch it. And it's just like, it's like a scratch you can't itch. I mean, an itch you can't scratch. So that's how I am when I listen to podcasts that have like bad audio. And I don't think it's fair. Like Samuel L. Jackson feels about, he don't think it's fair for artists to for singing artists and all of that stuff to just come in and start acting. I don't think it's fair for people to just say, hey, look, I'm going to start a podcast. Like, and then you just record something on your phone and talk about nothing. And that's your podcast. I don't think that's fair. Now, there's nothing we can do about that. We're in America. This is the land of the free. You have a right to do whatever you want. You have a right to start a podcast. You have a right to have that podcast sound like crap. You have a right to have that podcast sound like anything you want it to sound like. And you can have the right to say anything you want in that podcast. But what I'm saying is I just don't think it's fair to call it a podcast if they just turned on a phone and blah, 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 talk about nothing. The audio stinks. And then call it a podcast. Whereas other people who put work into this, with their audio, such as myself and a lot of other people who have podcasts, just work hard to get the audio for everybody else. I mean, I put in this work and, I put in work in terms of audio so everybody can have a good listen and it's not terrible audio. Even now, this is not how I usually record. The mic is out of the frame, which means the audio may sound a little different as opposed to when I move up to it like this. But usually my audio, and this audio probably sounds okay, decent, but usually my audio, I spend a lot of time making sure that it's good for you, not just for me, but for you. So I think everybody should do that. I don't think podcasts should have terrible audio. It's hard to listen to and it's not fair. But like I said, it's the land of the free. But so my question is, do you think there should be some type of audio requirement for any new podcaster to start a podcast? All right. So let me know what you think. This is going to be very interesting to hear. And again, this is the land of the free. I'm not saying I'm not mad about it or anything. It's just a question that popped up and it came to my mind. I figured I'll just ask. So let me know what you think. Do you think there should be some type of audio requirement for new podcasters to submit podcasts on other podcast platforms such as iTunes, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, whatever it may be, whatever you listen to, iHeartRadio, Spotify, whatever. Let me know what you think, and I'm looking forward to hearing your answer. This is going to be good. All right.